笑，滔滔灭共潮，四海英雄聚今朝，苍天笑，花间战红腰，浪沙淘尽怒白霄。整整70年，他把中华人民主义，还让这片土地变得满目疮痍。全世界投毒制造各种生化武器，我去，他答应了人类命运共同体。3代爆料，携手占有新天道，振兴我中华同胞，兴起了灭共浪潮。壮志冲云霄，看那国旗飘飘，别鸟铁岭河上，神州阳光普照。江山笑，血雨遥，谁负谁生出一份笑，风萧萧，人笑险如潮，太古开天风潮。3年多的爆料，就是给压死各种暴实锤，每天都有一点也不嫌多。以美灭共，以共灭共，还得靠我们战友们行动。天佑我中华儿女，共建联邦新中国。黑夜显曙光，照亮东方的天。戳破光辉的火焰，我准备了来世多年。越过了死亡幽谷，踏上了灭共之路。总有太多凶险，我们中华之声虚度。清风笑，收归正道，地州踏浪自逍遥。苍生笑，热血万丈高，仰天长啸志英豪。战友们豪气传云霄，寒武相聚在今朝。我定报 The one is the same for the world. Safety behind the people's side. We are running out of time. Take down, action. Take down the CCP. Take down, action. Take down the CCP. La 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 la. CCP， 你完了！他们的恐惧是我们的武器，我们的胜利。谢谢了，兄弟姐妹们，你们健身了吗？行动，行动，行动！中共，你完了 ！Take down the CCP。
Just beginning, but the games you want to play see, it's all started, everything's begun, and you are over, 'cause we're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. Let the bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
中共
Let the bullets fly a little
你
longer.
完了，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
中共你完了，干灭中国共产党这个 CCP， 还能让我们远离恐惧。Take down CCP。
They try to scare the nation with fabrication, but we see through the lies. We won't fall, we will fight you back. Police corruption with crooked assumption. They ran our lives, but no more. We will win. We will take down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. Let the bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧，
Let the bullets fly a little
为
longer.
奴役的人
Let
们
the bullets fly a little longer.
行动，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
行动，
Let the bullets fly a little
你
longer.
完了。
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down CCP。
Bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down the evil CCP。
Good evening, Fringers. Thank you for joining us this evening and welcome to episode 18 of The Fringe. I'm your host, David Vincent Bob. The Fringe is simultaneously broadcast in English and in Chinese on gtv.org. We are honored to have you here with us this evening and appreciate your patronage. Please spread the word about the show to all of your friends and family and subscribe to us and follow us on gtv.org and MOS Talk. But none of this would be possible without my amazing team. And tonight, I have an amazing co-host. You all know her by now, I'm sure. You all love her, and we here at The Fringe certainly cherish her. My fellow Fringers, let's give a warm welcome to a very good friend of mine, Ada. Ada, thanks so much for joining me tonight. It's always a pleasure to have you here on the show. How you doing this evening?
Thank you so much, David. I am doing great. Just happy to be on the show, especially with our Friday viewers. And today on The Fringe, we have a packed episode as always. So for today, we will be talking and looking at the latest, not only in the US, but in Hong Kong as well, with a special segment diving deep in to the situation and current events with the Uyghur community with our second time guest, Rika.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for that, Ada. Great having you here again. And now for some breaking news. There is a crisis at the border. Really? Didn't see that one coming, he said snarkily. Tom Homan, the former acting director of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, said Wednesday that Biden administration didn't want to admit that there's a border crisis because they created it. The Biden administration doesn't have to admit that there's a crisis, though. The only thing that really has to happen is U.S. citizens just need to take a look at the stats. This month, they'll have over 100,000 apprehensions, which is almost a 300% increase over this same time last year. When you increase illegal apprehensions by 300%, that's a crisis. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas Monday asked his department staff to volunteer to help with the overwhelming number of migrants at the border, saying in an email to his staff seen by Fox News that he had activated the volunteer force to support Customs and Border Protection, CBP, as they face a surge in migration along the southwest border. You have likely seen the news about the overwhelming number of migrants seeking access to the country along the southwest borders, he said in the memo. President Joe Biden and I are committed to ensuring our nation has a safe, orderly, and humane immigration system while continuing to balance all of the other critical DHS missions. Homan told Bartiromo that the number of children in the custody of U.S. Border Patrol is at an all-time high and accused the Biden administration of ignoring the crisis. We had the most secure border we ever had under President Donald Trump, said Homan. They picked it apart over a 2-week period. Now we have a crisis that they created. This is not by accident. This is by design. So Trump Tuesday night slammed Biden's handling of the border and said the United States is being destroyed by the current surge of migrants, reports Fox News. He added in a statement that the border under his watch was in great shape and stronger, safer, and more secure than ever before, and that the border wall would have easily been finished if Democrats hadn't stalled its construction. Homan said that Biden administration has done 2 things that really hurt the border effort and did them by design rather than making a mistake. First, they basically abolished ICE, he said. The rest of the world knows that ICE has been crippled because 90% of their authority is taken away. There's no interior enforcement whatsoever. If you get past border control, guess what? No one's looking for you. The administration also ended Trump's Remain in Mexico program, which also had been harmful, said Homan, because 88% to 90% of Central Americans who claim asylum never get released from the U.S. courts because they don't show up or they don't qualify. Homan pointed out that Mayorkas was a deputy secretary during the immigration surge in 2014 and 2015. So they know how we stopped the border surge back then. We did it by building detention centers and detaining people, not by seeing how quickly we will release them and allowing ICE to execute final decisions by courts to have the people removed. You know what the worst part about all of this is, Ada? It's that these people are being allowed into our country to disperse, or they are doing so illegally while also carrying the COVID-19 virus to further the spreading. They are calling them super spreader caravans. Do you really think an illegal immigrant is going to run to the nearest hospital or CVS pharmacy to get a COVID-19 shot with the risk of being captured? Nope. And who's paying for these people when they get into the US and can't find a job, because Americans can't even find jobs right now? That's right, Americans. Once again, Joe Biden has successfully put America last. And his administration is doing all of this because they didn't like Donald J. Trump. That's the reason, Ada, because they didn't like Trump. And they are all proving it, and all they are proving is that they don't like the rest of America either. It's the Democratic way, and this is very sad, Ada.
It really is, David, and it's so devastating to see all of this happen. But speaking of Democrats, the Hong Kong authorities charged 47 Democratic activists with violating the city's national security legislation on the 28th of last month, in the biggest application of the law since it was imposed by Beijing last year. Those charged with conspiracy to commit sedition were among 53 people. Many prominent lawmaker, activists, and district councillors who were arrested last month for organizing, planning, and participating in a primary election for the city's Democratic opposition last July. For those who aren't familiar with a national security law imposed by China on Hong Kong, this law gives Beijing the authority to destroy the freedom and autonomy the people of Hong Kong has enjoyed since the 1997 handover from Britain. The law targets crimes defined by the CCP as subversion, sedition, terrorism, and collusion with foreign powers. Those who offend this could be punishable with life imprisonment. And certainly we have seen an example of that just this month. An example is when this law was imposed, 39 men and 8 women charged on the 28th of February, aged between 23 and 64, are being detained. Under the original bail agreement, they weren't required to check in with police until early April. But earlier this month, the group was asked to report to police. The charges come less than a week after the Hong Kong government moved to introduce requirements for the people, including that they swear loyalty oaths and embrace Beijing's rule over the city. Anyone who fails to take the oath or is deemed to have done so in an insincere fashion will be immediately disqualified from office and banned from running in elections for the next 5 years. Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Eric Tsang said, "Charges against 47 pro-Democrat is of great concern to EU. These make clear that legitimate political pluralism will no longer be tolerated in Hong Kong. We urge authorities to abide by their commitments to fundamental freedoms and rule of law, as per #BL and #ICCPR," the EU office tweeted. Now let's roll a video to see what's really going on.
The young faces of Hong Kong's democracy movement facing the next year behind bars. Part of a broader crackdown on opposition lawmakers, activists, and students accused of everything from terrorism to unauthorized assembly. Voices that until recently were tolerated in this former British colony.
I think Hong Kong has fundamentally changed.
Lawyer Anthony Daparan has written books about the city's protest movements.
There were really no off-limits topics in Hong Kong up until this year. But now, this year, after the national security law, all of a sudden there are slogans that are illegal, topics that are off-limits for public discussion, books that can't be published anymore.
Hong Kong remains the freest corner of modern-day China, thanks to a pledge Beijing made to maintain a one country, two systems arrangement for 50 years after Britain's departure in 1997. But last year, the city plunged into turmoil when peaceful pro-democracy demonstrations gave way to bitter violence. After the chaos of 2019, 2020 has been Beijing's year to restore order. A new national security law drafted by the Communist Party in secret gave police new powers to crack down on dissent. Riot police now swoop in on anyone who dares to protest in the streets. Police also busted newspaper publisher Jimmy Lai for allegedly colluding with foreign forces to endanger national security. They raided his offices.
I think China already won with the intimidation. The effect is very strong already.
Citing the coronavirus pandemic, officials postponed elections to Hong Kong's legislature. And then the Legislative Council was hollowed out further. When 4 lawmakers were stripped of their seats for being unpatriotic, the rest of the opposition resigned en masse. Fearing arrest, a growing number are fleeing into self-imposed exile, including former pro-democracy lawmaker Nathan Law, now in the UK.
We've seen our freedom of speech and freedom of assembly being taken away, and it really shows that in 2020, Hong Kong people are not just suffering from a public health crisis, but a complete crackdown from an autocracy.
In her annual address to some empty opposition chairs in the legislature, the appointed chief executive Carrie Lam praised the national security law for restoring order and stability in the streets of Hong Kong. Since the first days of the controversial law, Lam insisted Hong Kong's basic freedoms would remain intact.
It will only target an extremely small minority of people who have breached the law.
Some freedoms do still differentiate this city from tightly controlled mainland China. Residents still have the freedom to worship. And the Great Chinese Firewall, which so strictly censors the internet in the mainland, has yet to be extended to envelop this region. But 2020 may be remembered as the year when Hong Kong's organized political opposition was all but crushed. Ivan Watson, CNN, Hong Kong.
As we can see from the video, that Hong Kong has been suffering in 2020, not only just from a virus, but another virus, which is just called the CCP. Like myself, I'm sure a lot of our fringers out there started listening and following Mr. Guo because of what he said for the Hong Kong people and how he stood in solidarity for their freedom. However, mainland China continues, and the CCP government continues to demonstrate that they cannot keep their word or act like a government should. A total of 15 defendants were granted bail by West Kowloon Court Chief Magistrate Victor So Wai Tak on Thursday. They were among 47 opposition figures, from former legislators to sitting district councillors, brought to court on Monday to face a joint charge of conspiracy to commit subversion, an offense introduced by Beijing through the national security law last June. Prosecutors accused the group of attempting to seize control of the legislature through a primary with the aim of paralyzing the government and toppling the chief executive. Following marathon proceedings that lasted for 4 days, which left defendants exhausted and some in hospital, So granted 15 of them bail on Thursday. However, the 15 were remanded almost immediately the following the magistrate's decision, as prosecutors sought to challenge the ruling. Though they made a surprise U-turn a day later, withdrawing the request for 4 of them, leaving just 11 to attend the Saturday's hearing. Their release on bail was the first for a defendant charged under the security law since the legislation came into force. However, with the jerking around and the endless trials, a lot of the defendants are really left powerless, completely, physically, and mentally. Here is a video of a mother of one of the devastated detainees after they were revoked from being given bail. Let's roll that clip.
你应该最开始的时候是好啲踩好啲踩好啲，再前方冇突破，發自意識，發自意識。
In this extremely emotional video, David, what the mother is saying is that the law is dead, freedom is dead. As she explained that her son, who was supposed to be let go and given freedom that day, got revoked. And just simple as that, the law is no longer there in Hong Kong. And my heart goes out to all of those people who are in Hong Kong right now, suffering from this, that hopefully we see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that the rest of the world sees what's going on in Hong Kong and what the CCP has done to their freedom.
Yeah, this seems to be a recurring theme. Well, we've known this forever now. I mean, thanks for bringing up Hong Kong again. We haven't talked about Hong Kong in a while, and that'll be something that I need to target, I think, in upcoming episodes. But there was a video that I played a couple weeks ago, and the people of Hong Kong, they have a choice. They can stay there and become prisoners of the CCP because they're going back on that contract that they had with Hong Kong. They're not going to honor that. Obviously, that's what's happening right now. They're not going to give them that democracy and freedom that they deserve and they earned. So basically, the people have two choices. They can stay there in Hong Kong and know that this government is folding to the CCP, and we can see that just by that video that you just showed, or they can escape. There are countries that are accepting Hong Kong immigrants into their country for freedom to get away from Hong Kong. But the problem with that is when you do, and they interviewed students, and that was the video we showed a few weeks ago. They interviewed students talking about what this was like and everything. The problem with that is when you leave your country, you're leaving it. You're saying, I give up this fight. So it's a very tough decision that they have to make. Do you want to stay and be a slave, or do you want to leave and have freedom? But when you leave, you're leaving the fight. And there are people staying there that are going to fight, and they're going to continue the fight for their freedom. See, that's something you need to know, Fringers, about what's going on in China altogether, is that it's not just Hong Kong. It's Taiwan. It's the Xinjiang region in China. It's their diplomacy with foreign countries. It's the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. Everything that the CCP does has the ultimate goal of them wanting to take over the entire world. And you can see it, just what they do to their own people and their own country. They're liars and they can't be trusted.
That is right, David. And we can see that the European Union is voicing out their concerns for those 47 democratic activists. However, we do hope that more powerful countries can come forth and just stand in solidarity with these people who are innocent and just defending what is supposed to be theirs and was promised to them. Countries maybe like the US, for example, this would make a huge change for the people in Hong Kong and for those people who are still there staying in the fight. And we really do pray that freedom is let back into Hong Kong.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of people don't know about, and that's why we share it here on The Fringe. And thanks for that story. That's a great story. And like I said, something we've kind of gotten away from here a little bit now that you're talking about it. You know, we've been talking about Myanmar a lot lately, and we won't be talking about Myanmar tonight too much, but we're definitely going to discuss the Uyghurs later on in the show, as you know. But the ultimate thing, you know, it's their goal is to dominate the world, and they're not being held accountable. And that's a word that you'll hear a lot throughout different shows that I've watched on GTV, is accountability. And China's just not, the CCP, I'm sorry, is not being held accountable for what they're doing to not only their own citizens, but to the rest of the world. And when, Ada, are they going to be held accountable? When is accountability going to be a factor in all of this? Because that's really what it's about. The longer you don't hold them accountable, the more they're going to get away with.
That's right. And it should stop here. That's why we're here bringing this to you, Fringers, especially those Fringers that are in the US, away from all of this. It's important to know what our brothers and sisters are suffering from right this second.
Right. Okay, let's move on here. So, in an exclusive report recently on OAN, it was determined by one of the world's top scientists that the COVID-19 virus has a 99% chance of being lab created. This is something we've known all along, and still, here we go again, no accountability whatsoever for the creation of the virus by the CCP in a lab in Wuhan, China. And here's that report now. Chris, if you can roll that video for us, please.
A powerful group of scientists are calling on the WHO to scrap its investigation into the origins of COVID-19 and start over. Here's One America's Chanel Rion.
You have been told again and again by mainstream media, by the World Health Organization, by China, that COVID-19 was a fluke of nature, a virus originating from bats. A China-friendly conclusion the WHO was likely to fossilize in an interim report. That is, until 24 scientists and doctors wrote an open letter in protest. The WHO, they argue, is not being honest about its inquiry. Driving this protest is the findings of the letter's co-author, Dr. Stephen Quay. Joining us remotely from Taipei, Taiwan, is Dr. Stephen Quay. Dr. Quay, you have quite the medical resume. You have over 360 published medical works that have been cited over 10,000 times. So you are listed as the top 1% of scientists worldwide. Quite a long and hallowed list of accomplishments there in the medical field. So thank you for joining us here at OAN.
No, it's great. It's great to be here.
The original assessment of where the COVID-19 virus emanated has stated that we have a 98% chance that COVID-19 was zoonotic in nature. It came from an animal and simply spread worldwide from there. So on January 29, you published a paper that directly contradicts the idea that this virus was natural. Your findings say that this is a 99% chance of having come out of a lab.
Yes, the study that I published is called a Bayesian analysis. It's basically a technique that we've used over 200 years to investigate competing hypotheses. And as I think you indicated, I actually started with the probability that it was 98% a natural zoonotic event. But through the analysis of 26 separate pieces of evidence, data that's out there, how many patients have we seen, et cetera, the conclusion actually reversed. My analysis is that there's a 1 in 500 chance that this came from nature.
One thing that really sparked my curiosity personally is this idea that we have for a long time experimented with COVID-type SARS viruses in the lab. And gain-of-function technology, is that something that could possibly explain what COVID-19 is today? I mean, based on your analysis, or is that just a separate topic entirely?
Well, no. So you're absolutely right to separate them. We have a history of collecting viruses in nature, bringing in the lab and studying them. We also have a history of taking some of those viruses and changing them genetically in what you've described as a gain-of-function experiment, in which the purpose is to make it more infective, more transmissible, or more lethal, with then to develop therapeutics or vaccines against that, to try to get ahead of the next pandemic. So those are two separate events. And this virus has signatures of both escape from a laboratory as well as gain-of-function research.
You express concerns that there are conflicts of interest between the World Health Organization's medical team conducting the investigation and the scientists and doctors in China.
Some of the scientists have in fact worked very closely with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is the laboratory in Wuhan that many people believe this escaped from. So it seems very hard. For example, here's a fact example, to have two of the members of the team publishing a paper in August with scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology about viruses coming from nature, and then in January going there to be investigating them for this outbreak.
If you, Dr. Stephen Quay, were in charge of a forensics team to go in and investigate the origins of this virus, what would you do? What kind of questions would you be asking?
Well, the very first thing I would want is access to the 20 databases containing over 20,000 bat virus sequences that were taken offline in September 2019 at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They were available to scientists all over the world until September of 2019. They've now been off for 15, 16 months. They said they were originally taken off because of a computer hack. But after 15 months, it would be very important to see those, because most people believe if it came from the laboratory that the sequences of the steps that were taken in the experiments are in those databases. So that would be my first ask.
It's a topic that seems to be it seems to have been cast by the wayside for a while, and we're very appreciative that you joined us to chat about this. Looking forward to visiting with you again soon, Dr. Quay.
Very good. Appreciate being here. Thank you.
Well, Ada, what do you think of that? We certainly have a lot to unpack here. Let me start by saying that it's about time that the WHO has been exposed. I think you and I, at least, and we know from following Miles Guo and GTV and Luda and everybody else, that this was eventually going to come out. We knew that this was going to come out. We talked about it before, how this was lab created. Now, all of a sudden, all the scientists all over the world are figuring it out. The WHO lied. We knew it, and this is breaking news for everyone that hasn't heard about it. This needs to be shared. It needs to be told. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell them to watch The Fringe on GTV.
Yeah.
The WHO lied. This virus, which the CCP vehemently denies was created in a lab, they've proven, the top science virologists in the world have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, 99% sure, certain, that this virus was lab created. They're saying now, of course, the CCP's rebuttal to this is that the US created this virus, brought it over to China and set them up and made it look like that they created the virus. What do you think about all this, Ada, as we unpack all this information?
I mean, we all know the CCP is doing what the CCP does best, and that is just blatantly lie. Even when all fingers point to them as being those who spread the virus in the first place and created the virus, they're still the ones to lie with their eyes open. However, we have seen Dr. Yan, our heroine of the season, who came out and stood forth, came to the US, leaving everything behind, and telling everyone and warning everyone that the CCP virus was lab created and that you can transmit from person to person. Yet, you know, the US denied that at first, which is something we should definitely look back on again. So if we already know that once we've been fooled, we shouldn't be fooled again. You know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So the US now has to keep their eyes open and definitely question anything that the CCP has to say, as we already seen from facts and data that the CCP did in fact create the virus in a lab, and it spread across the world and killed millions. So let's not have the same results happen one more time.
Yeah, you can't just let this go. And I'm glad that this information is coming out, because it needs to be further investigated, and it needs to be investigated by people that we can trust. And you can't trust the WHO. You know, I've been saying this people have been saying this for months and years now, that WHO and the CCP are in bed with each other. And I mean, this proves it right here. There's no reason at all for a scientist for the top virologists in the world to come out and say this without it being true. And like you said, Ada, we knew way back when it first broke, when our brave whistleblower, Dr. Yan, came over from China, risking life and limb to expose the CCP and saying that, yes, this was created in a lab in Wuhan, China. There's a lot more to unpack with this story. I can guarantee you that. We do need to get moving on here. We have another story here right before we get our special guest on tonight. So the senior Biden administration officials will hold their very first face-to-face talks with their Chinese counterparts next week, the White House and State Department said Wednesday, and I am very excited about this, because the meeting between Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and China's top foreign policy officials comes as the two countries navigate intense disagreements over trade and human rights in Tibet, Hong Kong, and the Western Xinjiang region, as well as the coronavirus pandemic and increasing Chinese assertiveness in the South China Sea. I can't reiterate how important that this meeting is, Ada, and I'm so glad that they're doing this right now, because this needs to come out and it needs to happen. I'm disappointed that Joe Biden's not going to be there, the president of the United States, but this is how they're carrying this out. At least they're talking. And I know for a fact that Blinken is going to sort of carry on the same tradition that Mike Pompeo did as Secretary of State when he's talking to these people. So we'll see what happens there. The cooperation on North Korea and how to constrain or end its nuclear weapons program is also likely to top the agenda of the March 18th meeting between Blinken and Sullivan and Chinese State Councilor Wang Yi and the Foreign Affairs Chief of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, Yang Jiechi, in Anchorage, Alaska. So this meeting is being held in Alaska with these very important and figures in the CCP. It's pretty simple. Blinken told the House Foreign Affairs Committee of his plans for the meeting. This is an important opportunity for us to lay out in very frank terms our concerns. I like Blinken. I'm going to tell you that right now, Ada. I think this guy's in there and he's in it to win it. We're going to dig down deep and find out what's going on here. The meeting will happen just days after Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin see their Japanese and South Korean counterparts in Tokyo and Seoul to reaffirm U.S. treaty alliances with those nations, and less than a week after President Joe Biden holds a virtual summit with the leaders of India, Japan, and Australia to discuss policy in the Indo-Pacific region. The meeting is an opportunity to address a wide range of issues, including ones where we have deep disagreements, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told reporters. We'll be frank in explaining how Beijing's actions and behavior challenge security, prosperity, and our concerns about challenges they pose to the security and values of the United States and our allies and partners. She added that the talks would also focus on areas such as climate change, where the U.S. and China can cooperate. We approach our relationship with the Chinese from a position of strength and in lockstep with our allies and partners, Psaki said. The U.S.-China relations nosedived while former President Donald Trump was in office, with his administration taking multiple actions against Beijing for its actions against the Uyghur Muslims and other minorities in Xinjiang and in Tibet, its crackdown on pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, aggressive actions toward Taiwan, and staking claims to territory in the South China Sea. Since moving into the White House, however, Biden has yet to make any significant overtures to China, signaling that many of Trump's policies toward the country will continue. And this is big news, Ada. I can't wait to see what comes out of this. This is what we've all been waiting for. This is what you and I have been talking about tonight up to this point. This is what we've been talking about in the past. Is the U.S. and our other nations going to hold China and the CCP, not China, but the CCP, are they going to hold the CCP accountable for everything that they've been doing now? And it's all going to come out at this meeting. Everything we've been talking about, Xinjiang, Tokyo, Myanmar, Taiwan, anything that the CCP is involved in and the U.S. wants answers. And I certainly hope they remain firm to this cause, Ada. Okay, and now for a special segment on the genocide of the Uyghur population at the hands of the CCP. Since the very first episode of The Fringe, I've covered various stories and have given the background of the Uyghur population in the Xinjiang province of China. The reason why the Uyghurs are always a very important part of what we do here at The Fringe is because as a humanitarian, I will not stop exposing the CCP for the tragedies of genocide against the Uyghur population. The Uyghurs, in case you don't know, Fringers out there, are a Turkic minority ethnic Muslim population that have occupied the western mountainous region of China's Xinjiang province for hundreds of years. Unfortunately, within the last, say, 10 years or so, they've been the victims of genocide put into place by the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. There are concentration camps all over the Xinjiang region that the CCP designates as reconditioning camps. There are atrocities going on in these camps, many of which we have covered here on The Fringe.
That is right. There are stories from those who have survived these concentration camps. Stories of the rape of women, the sterilization of the men, the forced abortions of children, forced labor, beatings, brainwashing, and murdering of those Uyghurs who don't comply. The Uyghurs are torn away from their families and put into camps where they are brainwashed to heed to the Communist Party's directives, and are forced to deny their own culture and roots and learn Chinese language, culture, and politics. They are forced to live by these ideals, and if they step out of line or disagree, they are put back into the camps and abused for even lengthier periods of time. The rest of the world is starting to wake up to this and starting to realize what is going on in these concentration camps. And there have been many protests and a lot of questions being asked of the senior CCP officials by not only the United States, but other nations around the world. As a matter of fact, senior Biden administration officials will hold their first face-to-face talks with their Chinese counterparts next week, the White House and State Department said on Wednesday. The meeting between Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and China's top foreign policy officials, including Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, comes as the two countries navigate intense disagreements over trade and human rights in Tibet, Hong Kong, and Western Xinjiang region, as well as the coronavirus pandemic and increasing Chinese assertiveness in the South China Sea. While President Trump was in office, U.S.-China relations took a nosedive as Trump and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo took a very hard and strong stance against activities in China, most importantly, the genocide of the Uyghur population. Pompeo is still a very strong advocate for the Uyghur nation and often make appearances on Newsmax, OAN, and Fox News to show his ongoing support for the Uyghurs and their plight. With President Biden in office, there seems to be a very lax attitude in regards to our relationship with China. But Blinken has taken a stance very similar to that of Trump and Pompeo, especially in regards to our stance with the Uyghur population. This, David, I think, is a sign of hope, especially in a desperate time right now.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's exactly what I talked about before. And I thank you for reiterating that point, that this situation is finally getting some notoriety, and people are really going to get together and talk about it. And that's the most important part. And I think a lot more, this is really going to expose what's going on. I think a lot of people don't know about this, and they need to know. And we've been begging people to please share our show with everyone, because we talk about the Uyghurs every single week. You know, every episode we talk about the Uyghurs, and I want more people to know about this. And I think this news, and then when it comes out, I'm so excited to see this meeting between the Chinese leaders and the Americans. I hope it's just not a lot of rubbish, a lot of talk. I really hope they make some advancements. And you know what's going to happen. I mean, the U.S. is going to say, hey, what's going on over there? And China's going to lie and deny everything. I'm sorry, the CCP. need people to make sure that they make that differentiation. Chinese people are not the CCP. They're completely different. The CCP runs the Chinese people. They have to do what the CCP says, or they're going to end up dead or in jail. Anyway, so this past Tuesday, Natalie Winters, senior reporter of the National Pulse, published an article about a new 55-page non-governmental legal report that finds the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, guilty of violating every single article of the United Nations Genocide Convention. And if you look on the screen right there, that's that report. It's 55 pages long, like I said. According to the United Nations 1948 Convention, signed by 152 countries, including China, genocide occurs if a party violates just one of the following 5 acts: killing members of a group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Winner says, the report posits the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, is guilty of engaging in all five, emphasizing it has an intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethical, radical, or religious group. Winners also wrote, the intent to destroy the Uyghurs as a group is derived from objective proof, consisting of comprehensive state policy and practice, which President Xi Jinping, the highest authority in China, set in motion, which was highlighted in the report. This is so big, Ada. This report is massive.
It is, it really is. And a lot of things are coming into light, which is so important to keep in mind that something else is also coming up. The Winter Olympics that is going to be held in Beijing next year. And there are many countries threatening to boycott, the US among that group, although they haven't shown their cards recently. That is said to be one of the very difficult topics to discuss at next week's meeting in Alaska. The Fringe will be sure to keep you up to date on any breaking news in regards to that very important meeting that we're all anticipating. My question to you is, why would the Olympic Games be held in Beijing after the entire world was ravaged by a virus created by the Chinese Communist Party in a lab in Wuhan? China, in an attempt to flex their communist muscle and show the world who's in charge? This, coupled with the fact that there is irrefutable proof that the genocide of the Uyghurs is occurring in Xinjiang as we speak, and should be more than enough reason for not just the US, but the world to boycott next year's Olympic Games.
That's right, Ada. And the big thing is that all these things that are happening right now, this is perfect storm of exposure of the CCP, and that's what's going to happen. And what this meeting this week in Alaska is huge. This is going to determine, I think, the outcome of this meeting, or the precedent that this meeting sets is also important. It's going to determine the outcome of if we attend the Winter Olympics next year in Beijing, or if other nations in the world do. It makes absolutely no sense. We would be celebrating the gathering of the most amazing athletes on the planet in a country whose government unleashed a biological killing weapon all over the world in the form of the COVID-19 virus. The virus killed millions of people of the world's population and continues to do so even today, as the CCP continues to kill thousands of innocent Uyghurs within their own country. Okay, so let's do this. I'd now like to introduce to you a very special guest this evening. This amazing young woman has been with us before here on The Fringe, and we are privileged and honored to have her here again, back with us again tonight. I'd now like to welcome Rika to the show. Rika, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Hi.
Thanks. Hi, thanks, David and Ada. It's great to meet with you, the Fringers, again tonight.
Thank you for joining us again, and we're so lucky to have you back. As we remember from 2 weeks ago that you were speaking from personal experience, and we would like to jump on to where we left off. So Rika, we understand you have a very special story to share with us about the massacres in Xinjiang. Could you please tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I have this story to share. My uncle went to Xinjiang in 2009 for business reasons, and he had this unforgettable conversation, according to him, with a Uyghur. Initially, the person was a bit cautious, and when they talk about the ethnicity, my uncle said that he was from the Hui minority. So for your information, Hui is the Chinese-speaking practitioners of Islam. So then they started this conversation. He said that the Chinese Communist Party was killing massive people using village as a unit. Means they massacred villages to villages. The person who was telling the story cried and told my uncle with fear and despair. Most of the villages are not wealthy in Xinjiang, and the villagers rely on the farming industry. So in the daytime, men will go out for animal farming and other work and leave the elders, women, and children at home. The armed police came and massacred the whole village. No one survived except for those farming men. And when the males went back to the villages and only saw the ashes, they were mad and in despair. When a government kills their family for nonsense reasons and they have no place to complain, what should they do? Of course, they will go to the government and wanted to retaliate against the CCP. And that even gives the CCP more reasons to kill villages of people because the government used the word terrorist as an excuse. This is just a similar tactic that the CCP has been using, like similar in Tiananmen massacre and in Hong Kong. Remember, this story was told 10 years ago. And in fact, this type of massacre has been happening for a very long time in Xinjiang. It's just that the CCP used different excuses. If we look back to the recent history, in the 50s to 60s, the Chinese government used the excuses of opposing division to kill those Uyghurs who wanted Xinjiang to be independent. In the 90s, the CCP used the excuse of fighting against religious extremism. Think about it. The CCP used the assimilation strategies in Xinjiang to let the Uyghurs assimilate into the Chinese culture. So therefore, as time passes, less and less people will be, as the CCP claimed, the religious extremists. So it's just the excuse to reinforce their absolute controls. And now they're using the anti-terrorism as one of their excuses for committing the genocide. As of today, this type of crime is still going on. We could see the surveillance cameras everywhere in Xinjiang. When I asked a friend of my parents, who is a Uyghur, she left Xinjiang 20 years ago and never returned. I asked her about the surveillance cameras, and she said, yeah, that's the way it is. This way, it's safer for them. I was sad to hear these words. You could say that this person is scared of the government, but you can also tell that this person has been so brainwashed that she is accepting everything that the government imposed on her. And that is also why we need to not only condemn this crime of genocide, but also take actions to expose the CCP. Because since the communists can control Xinjiang in this way, it could control the whole China, then Asia, then the world. Then the communists will come to everyone.
Thank you so much, Rika. And I know it's so difficult to speak of this, but David, do you know what this story reminds me of? It really reminds me of the CCP trying to play God. They're actually forcing a sort of Darwin's evolution, if you would say, and training people to be more tamed and killing off those are more rebellious, those really believe in their cultural and religious rights. They're killing off the ones that won't comply. And in the end, they're only left with those who are brainwashed. But this is something that they're doing and they are inserting to this population.
Yeah, it happens for years.
Yeah, you said a lot. There was a lot of interesting things you said there. And I purposely, before the show, Rika asked if she could share the story with me, and I asked her not to. I wanted to hear it live on the air with the rest of my, with Ada and with the rest of our fringers out there. This is the first time I'm hearing the story. This is the first time Ada's hearing it, and I want to thank you, Rika, for having the courage to share that. That is a very, very impressive, powerful, and thought-provoking story. That's something that we need as a people to listen to. You said some very important things there, and I think one of the important things to know about the Uyghurs is they are Muslim, and I do know that the CCP is trying to pin on them that they're a terrorist race. They're people automatically assimilate Muslims with terrorism, and that's what the CCP is exactly, and that's what you said too, that the CCP is trying to do here. It's so frustrating that they force these people to fight back. When you have a group of men that leave a village of women and children, and they come back to nothing but ashes, what are you supposed to do? Just like you said, Rika, of course you're going to want to fight back. And that is the way that they, like you said, pin that, they denote them as terrorists by pinning that on them because they are fighting back against this. The part of the story you don't hear about is what the CCP did to the Uyghurs. And that's the most frustrating part about this. And that's why stories like the one Rika just told need to be told and shared. And we thank you all for joining us tonight to hear and listen to this. It's so sad that this is going on. And again, this meeting next week in Alaska, we need this stuff to come out. We need it to be rooted out, and we need them to be held. And I'm going to use the A word again. The CCP needs to be held accountable for all of this. It's absolutely ridiculous and ludicrous that this isn't being shared more either on the mainstream media. You won't hear about it just because they don't want to talk about it. They'd rather talk about stuff in America that's unimportant, like what gender fluidity is and the woke movement and BLM. I don't care about any of that. I care about humanitarianism, which none of those organizations seem to care about, although they claim to. This is some important information, and I'm so glad that you shared that with us, Rika. And we'll definitely have more to talk about after you're finished here, I'm sure. But I'd like to move into our second question, unless you have something else you want to say about that, Ada, for now.
No, let's move on to our second question. We have so much more to uncover.
Yeah, so Mr. Guo, in one of his most recent programs, Rika, talked about high-end and the low-end populations in China on his live broadcast. It's actually this past Wednesday. Could you please share with us what you know from that live feed and your thoughts on that subject?
Oh, yeah. So basically, to define the terms high-end and low-end population, that means that the Chinese Communist Party is trying to establish a hierarchy or social classes, mostly based on your political power. So a couple of years ago, Beijing implemented policies to expel the so-called low-end population, meaning those Chinese citizens who are not born in Beijing and work there for a living. So most of their jobs are drivers, waiters, couriers, etc. The CCP categorized them into this lowest level of the hierarchy. So, and with that being said, this time all the population in China will be separated into different levels, where the communists will define the members of the Politburo Standing Committee, governors, and the higher echelons of the political realm as the highest levels. Their family members and dissidents will always enjoy endless wealth and fame just because of their political power, whereas the common people will be categorized into the lowest level. And among the lowest level, people with different jobs will have different levels too. So for example, the businessman will be at the medium level of the low-end population. The CCP will brainwash them and say, you have the opportunity to become a businessman because the CCP allowed you to become. So actually, the Chinese Communist Party has been doing this brainwash for decades. Like now, many people in the Great Firewall of China would think that their positions are lower than those politicians, and that conscience of being slavish has rooted in many people's minds. This is called the Five People's Ruling Strategies by Lord Shan, which intends to control people's minds and let the people voluntarily become the slaves of the regime. By talking about this plan of enslaving the Chinese people only, the CCP is already violating the human rights. And at this point, the world needs to pay attention and take action to convict the CCP as a transnational criminal group, because if the world didn't stop the CCP's strategy of having this hierarchy, this will be promoted to all the countries through the infamous BGY plan.
That is right, Rika, and thank you for bringing that up. The CCP has not only planned on spreading what they're doing inside of China, but they're doing so with the BRI movement, as we have talked about many times on the Fringe as well. These are things that the CCP is just so dangerous for, and that's why Mr. Steve Bannon also called the CCP a mafia group. And they're the ones that we should definitely fear. In terms of these social classes for our international fringers and you, David, these classes are set so that you can never breach between the classes. If you're born a lower class citizen, then you're going to stay a lower class citizen, and your next generation is going to do the same. They have set impossible standards that we can get into another episode that you can never cross. That means whatever you're born, you will die. This is something that only China has, and they have made it so impossible for the citizens of China to live their life being whatever they want to be.
Right. And I hope our American fringers out there just listen to what Ada just said, because that is the formula for communism, and it starts with socialism. We have this government right now in America, this democratic left-wing crazy liberal government that is pushing towards socialism. And what Ada just told you is exactly what happens with socialism. You are a class of people that can know. There's the thing about socialism is you're never ever given. There's no competition between people. It's a natural thing that all humans have. It's the ability and the to be able to compete and to rise above and to make something of yourself and have a business that can flourish. In a socialistic and communist government, you are not granted that right. You absolutely are. Just like Ada said, you're born into what you are, and that's what you stay. There's no going up, there's no going down. It's staying exactly where you are. The ruling class rules, and the lower class stays where they are. And they are the ones that are victim to the abuse of the upper echelon government, and the ones that are thrown in jail for not complying with what the government says. There's no chance of advancement. There's no, and you stay down. That's where you are, and that's how it runs. And there you go, America. If you want to be a socialist and you want to follow these Democrats, that's what you're going to end up with. What Ada just said right there. You're going to end up at the bottom, and that's where you're going to stay for the rest of your life. You're going to have no chance to advance. Everything's run by the government. They divvy out food, money. You don't. Everybody's an equal class, and that's the whole catch. There's always some new phrase about now it's democratic socialism. It'll be good because of this, and this. And well, look at Venezuela most recently, what just happened there. Socialism doesn't work. Communism doesn't work. If it did, you wouldn't have people trying to jump our walls and get into this country to get away from that. Look, open your eyes and see what's going on right now in this world.
That is right, David. And Rika has brought up so many points and really informed our fringers of what is happening inside of China. As us, everybody who are outside of the firewall, are not so familiar with what is happening inside of China, it's actually vice versa, because China, within the firewall, they don't actually know how deep they have been brainwashed, because it's just all they've known. And Rika, with all you know about China right now and all you've shared with our fringers very kindly, what do you think about the Winter Olympics that's coming up that we have also just brought up? Do you think it should be boycott, or if it should just proceed as is?
So, first of all, we need to think about this. How did the CCP get this chance to hold the Olympic Games? Is it because it has managed the country very well, or does it really let its people enjoy a happy life? The answers to these two questions are a big no. Then, how did it get this opportunity? So that is the BGY plan that I believe you, the Fringers, talk about on the first episode of your show. The CCP has committed the crime of genocide. It released the coronavirus. Each of these two took away tens of millions of lives. Why would we support a party that's so inhuman to hold this Olympics game? So in 1936, Hitler held the Olympics game and used it for the propaganda purposes. The Nazis promoted a new, strong, and united Germany to the world. This is exactly what the CCP is doing. It's trying to use this game to tell the world that it is strong, whereas everything is pretty fragile and fabricated. During the time the CCP proposed the U.S. The US proposed a boycott to the Olympics but failed. And then we all know that the ending of the Nazis, and unfortunately the price that many Western countries had paid were high. History is repeating itself. The CCP will definitely be exterminated. It's just a matter of time. But more importantly, as we talked before, the world has to accelerate the process to hold the CCP accountable, to give it a last punch, to prevent further losses for countries around the world and prevent the tragedy from happening again.
Yes, thank you, Rika. And here at the Fringe, we like to believe that all of the whistleblowers are an accelerator for this extinction of the CCP and of this evil communist party. I am so happy that you brought up Hitler, because there has been chilling similarities between Hitler and Xi and how they are countries. So the Winter Olympics is no different. This is something that communist countries or communist parties have tried to show the rest of the world that they are friendly, they're strong, and they are powerful. However, this is just a mask. Behind the mask, we know that the CCP is getting scared too. We have seen so many examples of the CCP responding to what the whistleblowers are doing and completely diminishing us because they are scared that we are spreading the truth to the rest of the world. So Rika, being so brave and being here sharing her stories, is one of those people. Right, David?
Yeah, and you know, in reference to the Olympics, I just talked about this on the last episode. I do not, absolutely do not, I will not watch it. And I do not think the Olympics should be held in Beijing. Absolutely not. There's no reason whatsoever. You know, there is a correlation. There was always one between Xi and Hitler. I mean, I've brought it up before. There's a definite, they're definitely going down the same path together. You can see it happening right now with the genocide of the Uyghurs and like Hitler did with the Jews. The difference is, though, we didn't know about the concentration camps in Auschwitz and Dachau, in overseas in Belgium and Germany. We didn't know about in Poland. We didn't know about these camps until after the war. They had no idea that this was going on until they were stumbled upon, and people were baffled by what they saw. But the thing is, we know that the CCP is doing this to their own people, to the Uyghurs. We see the pictures, we've seen the videos, we've heard the testimonies of the people that are in these camps suffering, that are sent to these places. We know that it's happening. So why would the world get together and celebrate the greatest athletes on the planet in a country that's doing this to their people? It's an absolute travesty that the Olympic Games are being held in Beijing and they need to be boycotted. I'm sorry to all the athletes out there that want to participate in these games, and I understand they spend their lives to get to this point where they're at right now. But unfortunately, we have to draw the line between what you think you need as a human being and what is human and what is humanitarian and what is not. And boycotting these games should be the number one thing that every single nation in this world does, not only because of the strife that they've put on their own people and the genocide of the Uyghurs and the way that they treat their own people in China, but what they've done to destroy the rest of the world with this coronavirus, with this COVID-19 virus. Absolutely absurd that we're going to China to celebrate something. And like you said, Ada, it's all a front, and Rika mentioned it too. It's all a front for propaganda for themselves. They do the same thing with the Belt and Road Initiative that I've talked about in the past. It correlates directly with that. There's a very similar way that the CCP operates, and what they do with the Belt and Road Initiative is they say, hey, look, this is China. We got all this money and we're so successful. Look how we're flourishing. We'll give you money so you can do the same thing, fully knowing that these third world countries are going to fail and they're going to end up owing something back to China. That's all it is. It's a facade. Their entire organization, everything in China that the CCP runs is run on a facade and lies, absolute lies. By Xi Jinping and his Chinese Communist Party to make you think that this country is doing so great and have all these amazing things, and they'll deny everything that's wrong. and it's something that needs to be looked at. And again, with this meeting this week in Alaska with our leaders, with our leaders in our government and with the CCP, hopefully this stuff will be exposed.
That's right. And having this opportunity and this platform and guests like Rika coming on to speak to our fringers is one of those things that are just so fundamental and something that we should ride the wave of social media with. Because with social media, this is something that is a great difference from what happened in World War II, is that we actually see what is happening with footage, with witnesses, with words that are spoken by the living. So with so much evidence, there is no reason for us to not believe and disregard the facts that we see. And it's so important for us to stand together to see what is right and wrong, because it's just as clear as black and white.
That's right.
So much, Rika, for being here with us tonight.
Thank you.
Yes, Rika, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're definitely honored to have you, and thank you again for sharing that story. Really appreciate it. And we will certainly have you on the show again very soon. Thank you, and have a great night.
You too. Thanks.
Whew, what a show, Ada, huh?
Oh, that was, honestly, it was a lot, but it was exactly what we needed, especially on a Friday night, I believe.
Yeah, there's a lot going on too. All of this stuff is coming together this week. I think this week is going to be a real, if you look in the history of not only our nation and of China and the CCP, this is a very, very important week coming up here. This meeting in Alaska is huge. They're going to be talking about everything that we bring to the table here on the Fringe twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays from 7 to 8. Isn't that right, Ada?
That is right. And the Fringe is where you're going to hear it first. Like what you heard just now, that's now being said publicly by left side media. We've already said about the virus as soon as it came out. So this is where you should be getting your news firsthand. This is where we're giving you the breakest latest news, and it's just all truth, all facts.
Yeah, we really need to focus on, we ask our fringers out there that are joining us tonight, just focus on what we're telling you right now, because you're not going to hear it on mainstream media. And we shared a lot of information with you tonight. We had a really great guest, and we really need to hone in on the Chinese Communist Party, on the CCP. This meeting though this weekend, I gotta reiterate how important this is. We're talking about, and I think Mr. Miles Guo, our fearless founder, our leader, has, I don't know if he's predicted this. Maybe it's me imagining it. Maybe he said it at some point, but it's something that I would like to see happen. And I maybe heard Miles say it. I'm not sure. I'm not quoting you on this, Mr. Guo. If you're listening, I hope you are. That the CCP would go down in 2021. This could be a really, really big year. And the thing is, and I was talking to my wife about this today, and it's that we want to have a great relationship with China. We really do. But we cannot do it while the CCP is running that country, Ada. We simply cannot.
Exactly. And I feel like with so much lies building up, it is like a balloon about to pop. We are so close, and we should be the pin that pops that balloon full of lies, exposing it of everything that it's done to the rest of the world, so that we are, one, holding them accountable for what they've done, and to accelerate this, we should be decoupling. Another thing that we speak about over and over again on the Fringe is decoupling with the CCP, so that they know the rest of the world has woken up and is no longer going to take their lies.
That's right. The pin that pops the balloon. I love the analogy. That's great. We should probably end it on that right there. So yeah, that great show tonight, Ada. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank you very much for joining me tonight, Ada. We'll see you again next Friday. And I look forward to seeing you what you have in store for us then.
Thank you, David.
And also a big thank you to our special guest tonight, Rika. You're welcome back anytime, Rika. And I look forward to having you again with us here at the Fringe. I want to thank you, all of you out there, for watching us this evening. our new Fringers who have joined us for the first time, and our dear returning Fringers who support us every single week. Please do remember to catch us live right here on gtv.org at MOS Talk. We're on every Tuesday and Friday evening from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m. Tell your friends and family about us, and let's keep this Fringe movement train rolling. All aboard. For all of us here at the Fringe, I am your host, David Vincent Bob. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve you this evening. Be safe, be free, and God bless you and your families. Good night.
Good night.
down the CCP, take it down the CCP, 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 take it down the CCP, take it down the CCP, take it down the, take it down the, take it down the CCP, 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 take it down the CCP, take it down the CCP, take it down the, take it down the, take it down the CCP.
Take down the CCP, take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. Let me tell you what I've been through, baby. Lived a life that was hella unfair. Seen things that been driving me crazy. In a country where the leaders don't care. Didn't think we had the courage to change it. Tore it down and they weren't prepared. Everything that they kept us from saying. Now we talking and they better be scared. Take from us. Tell us what and who to love. Swear I finally had enough. It's time to rise above. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families.
Communism sucks, hard for me to give a fuck. I had to tell them and they try to keep it on the hush. Middle finger up, turn into a fist. They wanna keep the poor poor so they never rich. If you wanna see the future, look into the past. Been a century of silence, we gon' take it back. I'm just stating facts, tell you how it is. Ain't no way to change shit if we don't resist.
Take from us. Tell us what and who to love. Swear I finally had enough. It's time to rise above. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families.
这是你我维护正义的必须，这是你我维护正义的必须。Take down CCP.
Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families.
你完了，共产党！你完了，共产党！你完了，共产党！你完了。